Hi, I'm Susan, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Lately, I've challenged myself actually, to go into my stash of what I call dogs. Some friends of mine and I, for a long time, have called our unfinished, slightly uninspired, maybe, paintings. Ones that we didn't want to part with yet, but we couldn't quite figure out how to resolve. We call those dogs. And here I'd like to pull out another, what I call a dog, and see if I can't crack it into shape. Now, I realize everybody doesn't enjoy spending 20 minutes or so watching paint dry, but come along while I tell you about some of my decisions in attempting to make this watercolor, this abstract watercolor, a little bit stronger. And you can let me know if you think it strengthened it at all to throw the kitchen sink at it. Join me. So here is what I started with. I probably finished, or I got it to this point maybe during the pandemic, maybe in 2020. And I put it in a mat and had a good time getting it this far, but it doesn't really do anything for me. So I've cut it out of the mat. And I have to think about this. I want to keep it a transparent watercolor, or mostly watercolor, and I want to think about what orientation to consider as I work on it. With these non-representational pieces, you know, it can go either way, but usually it speaks to me one way, sometimes two. I kind of like this as a vertical, even though the first version of this I considered a landscape. I'm starting out with a Holbein product called Lavender. I really like Lavender Holbein watercolor. It is very opaque, and I thought maybe it would help me knock back a little bit some of the areas, calm them down, because I feel like there's a lot going on. I had an awfully good time playing when I first did this painting, and maybe it just has too many areas of interest. So as you can see, this lavender is calming down that one area a little bit. I would consider this maybe a veil. You can see the other marks underneath it, but it just calms it down, like I said. Now here, I'm using some texture from this paper towel. Just, you know, I can't leave things alone. I always love to experiment, and I see a little bit of texture there that it left behind. This is just play. This is just, let's see what happens. And to be honest, the worst thing that can happen is that I don't pull this off, and I consider this simply an adventure, trying different things out. These are always wonderful ways to learn the properties of your paints and tools, and I will have at least learned some things, even if I end up throwing this piece of paper away. It's only paper. So dry brush didn't do anything for me. I got a nice big mop brush full of water with my lavender paint. And I'm pulling this painting out to the edges, of the paper. Okay, I pulled out some phthalo blue. This is a Daniel Smith paint, and there's just nothing like phthalo. It's a very strong, transparent color, staining color, but that's okay. This is going to add some dark values out to the edges of the painting. I can't leave the textures alone. I love to splash and scrape, and who knows? I'll either keep those splashes or I won't. I'm just building here. I do like these dark values of blue, though. I feel like strong colors might actually strengthen this painting a little bit. I'm not sure what black I used back when I painted this the first time. I'm thinking maybe I drew into the painting with a China marker. It has that look to it. It's very bold black. So this piece is considered a mixed media piece. I see some wax in there that I have used, and China marker and pencil. I'm building up the blue. Already I'm feeling like this is a stronger painting. Okay, I'm pulling out some Inktense pencils. I love to meander through an abstract piece like this with a pencil, and I'm allowing the pencil to come into the wet areas to get some wet onto the pigment of the Inktense. Inktense is actually an acrylic. Once it's dry, it becomes permanent, but and it's very much more saturated than a watercolor pencil. I love saturated color. You can see I'm turning the pencil. It's just a technique that I use. This is Pyrrole Orange. Oh, I just noticed I had signed this painting, so I'm using a vibrating eraser to get rid of my signature, because if I paint over that area and paint over the signature, I most certainly will not be able to remove the signature. So I'm really glad that that came up as nicely as it did. Adding some of that orange around the edges. I'm kind of growing this painting. I love the wet into wet there. Just another fun thing about watercolors. As they bleed, it's a really fun way to mingle color. I'm sneaking up on adding oranges, and I pulled out one of my absolute favorite colors, New Gamboge. I decided that yellow mixed with the orange would certainly create some excitement. This big wash brush holds so much pigment, so much juiciness. I love painting with it. The brush is called a connoisseur. It's a 1/2 inch mop. I like to work with big brushes. They keep me from being too picky. I also like to hold on to the end of them for the same reason. If I get my hands up around the ferrule, it just feels like I'm choking that brush, and I don't have the freedom that I have back at the back of the handle where I can sort of bounce it around. To go back into a dog, if you will, an old painting like this, you know, the worst that can happen, like I said before, is that it doesn't become a successful painting. But I feel like you can really take a lot of chances and try things that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily try if you were trying to create a masterpiece. There's no pressure. So the best part of this is experimentation. And there's nothing I enjoy more than experimenting with a painting, with a technique. So I had some of that phthalo on that mop brush, and I'm kind of liking the way it's bleeding into the New Gamboge, creating kind of a green mix. Ooh, that's fun. I pulled some very wet paint with my pencil. It's so much fun using these pencils, or in this case, maybe overusing them. I'm trying to think about this in new ways. When a viewer comes across a non-representational painting that really works, it just seems like, oh, that artist could do that very easily. These things must just fall out of the brush, when in fact it's far from it. There is a lot of contemplation that happens when you paint intuitively. This is a perfect example of that. What is this painting telling me? What does it need? What can I add to it? With watercolor, there's not a lot that you can do to remove something, so it's a little bit more strategic when you're coming to making decisions. Now, of course, there are always opaques. I often paint in acrylics, and I know that I can go back into this with acrylic and turn it into a landscape or a portrait. I mean, this piece of paper could be gessoed over. There are many ways to go back in with opaques, but sometimes I really enjoy the challenge of using the properties of watercolor and seeing if I can't solve it without opaques, just for fun. This painting is not lacking in visual interest, I realize, and that's that's typical for my work. It's always a bit maybe too much, but I love the busy paintings. I love pattern and texture and color. Okay, spinning it around one more time, thinking about this. There's a lot going on. Well, I let that painting rest for a few minutes and I came back to it. And I decided it needed more. I feel like if I add more, I apologize for the autofocus, it's not working exactly the way I wish it were. I realized that if I add a little bit more value and settle some of these passages down a little bit in terms of texture, it will draw the eye into the center. So I'm calming some of the orange passages down a little bit, doing a little bit more even wash down there. I find that when I squeeze fresh paint out, I really enjoy getting lots and lots of paint on my brush and getting in with really saturated paint. It doesn't work quite as well for me to reconstitute dry paint on my palette when I'm interested in really saturated color. And I'm doing the same thing with my phthalo blue as I did with the orange. I wanted to settle down some passages of the blue so that everything isn't quite so busy. Settling down by adding some darks. Still a little bit more paint. For the darker blue. Going in for more values. On the left side, pulling some shapes together a little bit. Now the question is, which side is up? I really feel like this is meant to be portrait orientation rather than landscape, but both ways work. So this is the before, and you can help me decide whether this is a stronger painting. I feel like it is, and I think I might add a signature. Thank you for joining me. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I hope to see you again.